June 26th. Councilmember Dennis Pizine, Chair. Councilmember Bill Rosendahl. And Councilmember Tom LaBonge is not going to be here today. On the agenda, we have 4 items. So we will start with number 1. Mr. Cooper is available today. We're going to extend your term until 2015.
Item number 1,
Mr.
communication from the mayor relative to the reappointment of Mr. Mark Cooper to the Quality and Productivity Commission for the term ending September 6, 2015.
Thank you. Mr. Cooper, you were not here last time due to some medical situation. Are you recovered fine now? Fine?
My what?
Have you recovered from
Mostly. Thank you for asking.
At least you're better than you were, I assume.
A nice smile, though.
Mr. Cooper's a fine gentleman. I've known him for quite a while, so I'm not going to recuse myself from what I know about Mr. Cooper, but he's a very nice man from the Valley. And you've been on this commission how many years?
6 years, I believe.
6 years. It's a lot of dedication, Marty. You have, well, no, he's got an extensive background. This will take him to 2015. So obviously the mayor thinks highly of you to reappoint you. You did edit the Daily Bruin. You did go to UCLA. We are south of Mulholland. You wrote the book, North of Mulholland.
Yep.
I remember that. What can I say about Marty Cooper?
I know.
Well, you're a mayor's appointee. Were you originally a mayor's appointee?
Sorry?
Were you originally appointed by the mayor?
Yes.
President.
A monument to your good taste, I might add, council member.
Yes, you're right. Let's see what else it has here. There's a whole lot of stuff on you.
It's the result of age.
How old are you?
70.
You're what?
70.
No, you're not.
Okay, I'm lying.
I'm 67, so we're close.
You're older than Bill? You look younger.
Clean
You've had
living.
an easy life.
Clean living and lots of stuff and drugs and rock and roll.
You're inspiring
Not
me
as
now.
bald as this character, though.
Well, I do this intentionally. You should do that too, by the way.
Yeah, I will pretty soon.
He's getting
I'm going to
there.
grow a beard, too. I am. If I get elected to a third term.
What do you mean, if?
Well, it's up to the people.
That's true. So what have you found the frustrations with the commission that you are a member of?
The frustrations really boil down to 2, I think. I served as president of the commission for 3 years, and I think I spent the bulk of my time, which probably averaged about 10 hours a week, attempting to get some staff for the commission. When I first joined the commission, it had a staff of 5. It was cut to 2, and it was cut to about half a person, and we have some support now. The challenge is that this particular commission can accomplish a lot for the city. With the reduction in the number of employees in the city, obviously that hurts morale, which obviously spills over into productivity, cost effectiveness, and the quality of work. That's something that our commission is empaneled to address, and I believe we can do it effectively. But unlike most commissions whose focus is outside City Hall, our focus is inside the city. Our focus is with the employees of the city. So as about 15 outsiders, if you will, we need the assistance of someone who's inside, in quotes, to give us the facts and the information to allow us to do our job. And I'd say that lack of staff support, largely due to cutbacks on the City Hall payroll, the city payroll, pardon me, is probably our single biggest frustration.
And then what about cooperation with departments when you want to get information?
The departments are pretty good about giving us information, meeting with us when we ask them to, providing us information. Part of the problem, again, and it relates back to the first point I made, part of the problem is we're not in the best position to ask the most intelligent questions because we're outside, mostly business people, asking questions that are, shall we say, quasi-informed because we don't have the staff support to gain the research and the information that will allow us to ask the proper questions, the more incisive questions, the more penetrating questions, which would allow us to be more effective in doing our job.
So analogy could be like your little,
Sorry?
the analogy would be like your little rowboat and you don't have any oars to
It's
push
a
you
good
anywhere.
analogy.
You're just sitting out there floating around.
That's a good analogy.
And what about turnover? How's the turnover been since you've been there?
I'd say it's close to 100% turnover. We're authorized with 15 members. I think we've probably averaged about 12 or 13 in the 6 years I've been there. And I think, while I don't know why every resignation has come about, my sense is, just talking anecdotally to other commissioners, that they're frustrated because of the point I made earlier.
Okay. All righty. Mr. Bill?
Yeah, let me ask you this. You've been there now the longest, right? Pretty much?
I
would you
think that's
say?
correct.
This commission is called Quality and Productivity Commission. After 6 years, what has this accomplished in terms of dollars and cents?
In terms of dollars?
Yeah.
Much as I'd like. Interesting, you asked me that very same question when I was originally confirmed, I think, about being able to quantify the work of the commission. And it's a good question. And I think I can't look you in the eye and say we can quantify it with these dollars or those dollars. I think it's fair to say that we have saved the city hundreds of thousands of dollars in the sense of, this is anecdotal, in the sense of, through our annual awards program, getting people to focus on quality and productivity and cost effectiveness and increased efficiency. Could you quantify that? You could spend a lot of money on a research study and quantify it. Can we quantify it at this point? I don't think so. But I am confident.
What you do when you had a full staff and this and that. Specifically, how does a commissioner operate? What is the agenda put in front of you and you act on?
Okay. The single most impactful thing the commission has done and continues to do is to hold an annual awards program. Each year, every department in the city is invited to submit nominations for work that they have done that fits under the rubric of quality and cost effectiveness and so forth. We go out and we make site visits. We have tended to average about 100 submissions. So there's very great awareness of this program and great participation on the part of the city departments. We go out and we look at, let's say, the 100 or whatever the number is, applications. We pare it down to maybe 50, and then every commission member goes out and engages in site visits. 2 or 3 of us will go out to any department to see any program, how it works, what it does. We analyze it, bring it back to the rest of the commission, and we hold pretty extensive, pretty lengthy discussions about what's worthy of being honored by our commission. Then we hold an awards event, at which those who are being recognized are honored. That's been going on for about 20-plus years.
And when you do that, and you get those applications and you review them and you go out, I'm supposing what that means is that it encourages those departments to be efficient and productive, and that's where your cost savings are. Because, you get an award, you've made a difference, you've gone in a way through a competitive process within your own group, and part of that application or suggested nominee, do they quantify what that person might have done and how they did it so that you get an appreciation, obviously, or when you do the site visit?
It's kind of a 2-part question. On the application form itself, we ask the department to put down how much that represented in savings. So we could pull out all of those and give you those numbers that they estimate they saved. The reality of it, of course, it's difficult to quantify, but they must put down an amount that they saved the city or improved city revenues or improved effectiveness in that particular activity. The other half of your question is, yes, maybe I'll use an analogy as Councilmember Zine did. For a decade, I was in charge of public relations for the Motion Picture Academy and the Academy Awards. And I always used to talk about the fact that the Academy Award stimulates excellence by honoring excellence. And I think if you were to summarize this whole program up, that's what it does.
And how many do you give out a year when you do the banquet lunch dinner?
Approximately 24. There's no set number, but approximately 24.
And you kind of add up what those 24 do in your mind?
And as I go through it and look at those 24, what are we talking about? We're probably looking at a few $1 million.
Okay, great. Thank you for that.
Now, when we talk about quality and productivity, an item that was on the schedule today on council that was continued till tomorrow, item number 8, quality and productivity deliver service to the people, and they want to write off approximately $170 million in debt to the city. Do you folks ever discuss the debt that's owed the city of Los Angeles?
We have not.
Okay. That might be an item to come up in commission that we're going to be discussing tomorrow in council. But it seems that their collection process has many faults, and the process has many holes, and people take advantage of it to the tune that we talk about a budget deficit, we talk about financial problems. If we would just collect what's due us, we'd be a whole lot better off.
If you'll give me the details on that $170 million, I'll make sure we do discuss it and get into it. The second response I would give you is, whenever a department comes to us, and I'm just thinking of a few specifically, the excuse we almost always get is, yes, we got, for example, we got the controller's report on this, and we looked at the audit, and there's lots of good stuff in there, but because we don't have enough people, we can't implement the things that have to be fixed. So the almost invariable excuse that we're given when we hone in on some of those audits from the controller's office, the invariable excuse we're given is, yes, we're working on it, but it's been 2 years and we haven't resolved that yet because we don't have the manpower to do so.
And then the statute runs, and then it's wasted
And
time.
then it's dissipated.
See, if we ran a business like we run this machine, I think we would have been out of business a long time ago, sadly.
Sorry?
Obviously, if we run this like we run a business, if a business was run this manner, it'd be out of business a long time ago.
People always talk about, why isn't government more like business? Well, government isn't business. It's different than business. It's very different than business. And yet there are a couple of things that should be the same. And you should run an organization that's a municipality the way you run a business from a financial standpoint. And you should collect your debts. We don't collect our debts in this city.
It's a huge issue. And to write them off to me is not an answer.
Because it seems like a no-brainer to me.
What, to write it off?
Part of the issue.
Go after it.
First of all, you're absolutely right. But part of the issue is, it's this when it comes to collecting it. Is it the department's job to collect? We looked into monies owed to the city for parking lots revenues, huge amounts of money. Is it the department who oversees that responsibility? Is it another department's responsibility? Is it law enforcement in the city? It's always this. It's someone else's job.
Yeah, well, that's why we're going to do this inspector general, you know. Somebody's got to centralize it and take the accountability.
Well, I think that there's enough mechanism in the city now with departments and the process, and we've been around 228, 229 years, in order to have it work a lot smoother than it's working, especially the revenue that needs to be collected to pay the bills. You can't keep charging and not paying that bill, and getting more credit cards, and your credit limit goes higher and higher, and you finally have to pay. And then if you can't pay, then you just throw your hands up and say, we can't do it. It's mismanagement, I think, that creates that type of environment. So there's a lot of issues with it, but the bottom line is quality is critical, because if you go to a restaurant, they give you poor service, you're not going to go back. If the food's terrible, you're not going to go back. Productivity to deliver what the people are paying for, because they're paying taxes. They deserve to get quality and productivity and all the missions that we...
And the sad part, council members, is all the media is interested in covering, of course, is when city employees are not doing a good job. With all the employees we have, of course, we're going to have some employees who don't do a good job or who are going into some strip club when they shouldn't during working hours, or sitting in their truck, their city truck, having a drink. Of course, that's going to get the media's interest. And one of the things we've talked about is, one of our things that our commission would love to get into is taking the message of the city's interest in quality and productivity to the community. I mean, we want to go out and speak to chambers of commerce and homeowners associations and neighborhood councils and say, here's what your city's doing in the areas of quality and productivity. Here's how we're training our employees. Here are the kinds of awards programs and the incentive programs that we have. Because the people that all of you work for, the citizens of this city, only hear the bad news. They don't ever hear the good news. And one of the things, this is my personal opinion, this is not speaking for the whole commission, one of the things that we should and could do is, as 15 people in the community, we don't get city hall salaries. We're not on the payroll of the city, so we can have a level of objectivity that those on the payroll can't have, is to go out and take the message to the city that there is quality, there is cost effectiveness within the city.
With that, Mr. Rosendahl, do you have a recommendation on Mr. Cooper?
God bless you for staying with it and being a positive spirit and all that, and I obviously support your renomination and appointment.
Better to light a candle than curse the darkness.
And this will go to council when?
It's scheduled for tomorrow.
You'll be back tomorrow?
See you tomorrow.
You like going back and forth on the 103 freeway, I guess, huh?
Thank you both.
Thank you. Thank you, Marty. All right, that is approved for reappointment of Mr. Cooper. Number 2, please.
Item number 2, controller reports relative to comprehensive management review of the Los Angeles Department of Transportation.
Good afternoon. We have the general manager here. Amy, thanks for being here. Good afternoon. Some people send their staff. You come personally. That's good.
Of course.
We're impressed.
All right. Take it away, controller.
Good afternoon. Siri Kalsa from the Controller's Office, the Audit Division. Last year, as a result of several audits and investigations by the Controller's Office, as well as other concerns that were raised, there was an overall concern about potential systemic weaknesses within the Los Angeles Department of Transportation.
That was before the current general manager.
That was. At that time, the mayor's office had requested, actually, the controller to do an independent review for a kind of a comprehensive management assessment and assistance to the department that would really focus on improving performance and accountability. The controller's office, through a competitive process, issued a solicitation and ended up hiring KH Consulting Group to perform this independent assessment, which actually turned more into a collaborative process, a management audit and assistance provided in close collaboration with the Department of Transportation. And Gayla Hartzell from KH Consulting is here to present that review.
And I would just like to thank the H Committee for inviting us to share with you the results of the management review. My name is Gayla Hartzell, and I'm president of KH Consulting Group. I think it's important to look at the context for this management review, and I wanted to take a little bit of time to talk about how this is different from a traditional management audit. When we came in, there had already been a series of audits done by the city controller. Jaime at the time had been the deputy mayor in the mayor's office and had encouraged the city controller's office to do a management audit, was thoroughly supportive of it, not knowing that he might become the department head. So during the course of the review of proposals, we basically said we see this more as a need for change management. It looked like there was a great understanding of what was broken, but the biggest challenge is really defining what's the appropriate course of action to take to fix it. The timing was also interesting because, as you know, the media had focused a lot on the Department of Transportation. There was a lot of concern about the executive turnover at the department head level. I believe there have been 6 general managers over the department over the period of 8 years. So when Jaime came in, he actually, for us, it was a nice win-win because he welcomed this opportunity for a clean review done. And what we did is we divided the study into two parts. Phase one, we call it a reconnaissance, where we quickly zoomed in on what were the key strategic issues that had to be focused on for the department. So during the first 6 weeks, we conducted 40 interviews within the Department of Transportation, going down to the division
How many
section level.
interviews did you do?
40.
40.
In addition, we did 22 external interviews, which included 9 council offices and other city departments, as well as Caltrans, Metro, and other collaborators. We surveyed all employees. 919 employees participated. And from that, we identified both strengths and opportunities for improvement. Again, classic in any kind of a management audit. The strengths were very compelling. A professional cadre. When we surveyed the employees all took great pride in their individual work. They felt very good about the work even among their peers within their own section. There was less known and less trust of the work being done across divisions or throughout the department. And so it's been a very egocentric, I'm very focused on my own organizational silo and the work I do. So in phase two, well, first we recognize other strengths. We recognize that the ADSAC system for traffic control system is world class. We recognize that there's lots of new parking innovations and technology happening with Park and Pay, solar meters. Los Angeles Department of Transportation operates the second largest transit network in LA County. And they had very innovative solutions in a group called Business Solutions who said we have limited resources, let's come up with some immediate fixes we can implement within 6 months to help the department run better. So there were some very good building blocks. So even though the media had cast a shadow on the department, we felt this was a good department to begin with. What we did at the end of phase one is we identified 7 areas that needed more focus. And we formed action planning teams, and over 80 people in the department participated. And we encouraged a diagonal slice for this participation. So it wasn't just executive leadership and middle management. We also encouraged that some of the newer talent that had been hired participate in these work groups. Our consultants facilitated them, and the idea was to come up with action plans of very specific things that could be done that they could implement ideally in the next 1 to 2 years. Long-range planning obviously will take longer, but most of the initiatives are really focused on 2 years. I'd like to spend a little bit of time sort of talking about the themes of those 7 departments and then, or 7 action initiatives, and then open it up to questions you have. On a very high level, we felt it was important that there be a common vision, and that the vision had to be things like not just being world class, but how do we really improve the quality of life in terms of how we move people and goods. Historically, the department had really focused on what they controlled, which was the city streets. If you look at the vision and mission now, it's looking at how can we collaborate with our other partner organizations, be it Caltrans, be it Metro, be it Metrolink, so that we can make it more seamless how we move about the city and how we plan. We looked at long-term transportation planning, and an important starting point is for the department to work collaboratively with the City Council in defining the principles for transportation in the city going forward. Revisiting its own policies to make sure they're consistent with those principles. They are currently working with the Department of City Planning to update the mobility plan and the general plan. They will be developing in a very thoughtful way the legislative priorities, policy, capital projects, grant priorities going forward so they can be proactive rather than just responding when an RFP comes in. There's a greater need in terms of planning to look at safety. Right now, Los Angeles averages about 1 auto-related fatality every other day, and most of these fatalities involve school children, preschoolers, and the elderly. And there's a greater, and when we look at that in terms of the dollar implications for the city, it averages around $2 million per year in terms of liability. So it's a high price we pay. So those were sort of the longer range plans. When we looked at it, we also had to look at the structure. Do we have the right structure in place to achieve that strategy? And we worked closely with the department head to come up with a structure that has a closer functional alignment and greater ability to execute a longer, more integrated, collaborative approach going forward. Other areas you'll see in the management review that we focused on, and again, this was done collaboratively so we could build buy-in within a cross-section of the department, people to implement it, to make the things happen. So it involves human resources. Rather than just processing grievances, really looking at the pattern of where are their problems, what is happening, do we need better supervisory training, how can we help solve problems and train management to help resolve issues before they reach a grievance level, for example. We looked at areas of management tools that needed to be developed, ranging from budgeting to grants to contracting and getting more performance measurements in place for accountability. We wanted to move more from individual to collective responsibility so people could be proud of what the department did overall. Another area was project management. Again, it's a cultural shift to move the department from not just managing projects, but delivering on those projects they manage, delivering them on time and under budget, training people so there's a consistent way in how they manage the projects, flexible staffing so people can be cross-trained and redeployed based on peaks and valleys and workload, better technology for tracking projects and work in progress. And the other area we looked at had to do with parking and overtime and how they assign traffic officers so that it would be more equitable and more consistent, and finally meter revenue collections. So that's the range of what we looked at. I believe you've had an opportunity to look at the audit. It's over 200 pages, and Jaime can expand on content of what they've done since the review, and I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Okay, thank you. Well, the first question I have is, what did the audit cost the city?
What did what?
Well, how much did it cost the city to do the audit?
You know, I actually have that dollar amount at my fingertips.
$274,785, and it was paid for directly by the Department of Transportation.
Okay. And how many of the recommendations that were made have not been implemented yet?
Well, let me give a context. There are 26 action plans.
Okay.
We delivered the report in April. This is now June. And all of the action plans have been accepted in concept.
Okay.
And all of the areas that have been targeted for implementation are on schedule. There are 2 areas when I met with Jaime this morning where there's going to be deferment in terms of the timeline. One is when to establish a formal office to do long-range planning. Not that there isn't a need to do long-range planning, but basically making that formal. And the other one is the establishment of a permanent centralized contract and procurement function.
Okay.
But I'll let you comment more specifically on what you've done.
So you didn't disagree with the findings. You support the findings?
Yeah, we support, I would say, 99.9% of the findings and recommendations. There were some minor things. For example, Gala recommended moving the taxi function under transit services, and just for workload balancing, as I explained in the matrix we submitted to the controller, I just thought it was better to keep it where it was. But other than that, it was a very collaborative process. We do agree with both the findings and the recommendations, and we're on track to implement. And then the report before you today is a transmittal from the controller asking me to report back on status of 14 specific areas, mostly related to organizational culture and structure.
Right. And we are a car culture. We can build all the orange lines and blue lines, green lines, and every color line you want, gold lines. We're a car culture, and it'd be nice to have everyone take public transit. But for many of us, it's not practical, since it doesn't go everywhere we need to go. We need to be a certain place at a certain time. So keeping that in mind, keep traffic moving, which is the key. Coming in today, they're doing something, Katy Perry on Hollywood Boulevard, so Hollywood, the Highlands jammed, the 101's jammed, it's a mess. And then I just think, well, let me try the 134. 134 is clear sailing, the 5 is clear sailing, and we got alternates, and we find those, like a little mouse, you're going to find a little escape rat, actually, we found that. But we are car culture, and we're not going to change that mentality in the near future. I wish we could. I wish we could be like many cities where majority of people going back and forth to work jump on public transit. With the system that we're putting together, bits and pieces, it doesn't all connect. If you want to go from the Valley to LAX, there's really no viable public transit to get from the West Valley to LAX, especially if you're going 7 o'clock flight or 8 o'clock in the morning flight. So keeping that in mind, the audit reflects recommendations. You as a general manager, you got a lot of history with the city. You worked in the mayor's office. Now you're a man on top of DOT. saying, I've got to take care of the taxi cabs, I got to take care of DOT, I got to take care of banners, I got to take care of this, got to take care of the council, the constituents, neighborhood councils. You've got your plate full. How do all these recommendations fit in as a car culture and what you need to do as general manager?
Well, I guess I'd say two things. First, on the issue of car culture, I guess I partially agree with your statement. I think that everybody is going to continue to drive at some point, but really what we're trying to develop is a system that's integrated and that provides options for people. That's everything from hot lane, which is a voluntary toll, to the expansion of public transit, to potentially congestion pricing in the future. The council has supported a variation of that in downtown with the Express Park program. So, DOT is going to continue to try to optimize the flow of traffic, but we also have to invest in other modes of transportation to provide alternatives. That's part of what we're doing with the bike plan, which was directed by the City Council. Next fiscal year, you're going to see more focus on pedestrian planning and safety projects as well. The second part of your question related to the actual organization. Each of the executives in the department has been charged with responsibility for implementing their respective action plans. Dee Allen, who's with me today, I think you know her. She's in charge of managing that overall implementation for me within the department, so she reports directly to me. So this has the highest level of senior attention within the department. And obviously we're going to continue to deliver our daily services through our operations to the council, mayor, and the public.
And I know that one of the issues is the revenues that are collected from those violators. We just did a detail with your folks in DMV and LAPD on handicap, which has been a continuing, growing problem, the misuse, where people are parking for free, not feeding the meter, taking advantage of it, depriving people who really need it. And DOT was very responsive. And your, I think, the deputy chief was out there with us at 6 o'clock in the morning.
Yes, Brian Hale.
Brian did a fine job. So, I mean, the cooperation, the DOT jumped right up and said yes, and then DMV jumped up with their investigators, and we got some volunteer reserve officers. So, I mean, that cooperative effort, you take those resources and stretch them out as much as you can. Did it go into collections at all? The issue of collections?
We did.
That seems to be a real issue on collections.
Yes, and there's a shift that's happening, which is very positive. More people will be paying using credit cards. The collection area, we've suggested they look at fully contracting it out. There currently is a coin room. There's been problems in the coin room, and we think there would be more focused accountability in terms of tracking the money if it was all handled by in an outsourced way.
Well, that's from the meters. What about from the citations? That's contracted out now?
Yeah, that's currently contracted out, and also the department's in the process of doing a procurement to retain a new vendor, and we'll have a recommendation to council in the fall. But just on collection efforts, generally speaking, we're doing a better job. I announced earlier this month that we've already hit the $141 million target that council mayor set for citation revenue this fiscal year. Next week we'll have the final numbers for the fiscal year. It's going to be above that number. So I think we're doing well in that area. We're also looking at different innovations. So some of the more recent innovations include withholding vehicle registration at the DMV if you have outstanding tickets. So you actually have to pay your tickets before you get your vehicle renewed. In other cases, if you have a tax return pending with the Franchise Tax Board, we actually withdraw, with the cooperation of the state, all of your outstanding parking fines and penalties prior to you getting your tax return. So we are trying to innovate in that area to get as much collection done as possible.
Excellent. Well, there's a difficult task, obviously, to juggle it. It's like you're in the circus and you've got all these you're trying to make it all work from one end to the other. I know that the bandy taxi cabs are an issue for the legitimate taxi industry, the flagrant violators, the street sweeping. I mean, there's so many issues that are juggling, and I know there's been that inconsistency with the department general managers prior to your arrival, because there's been some real concerns where who's running the ship. I don't think there's any question now who's running the ship and how well it's being run in a positive fashion.
Thank you.
So, commend you for that. Mr. Bill?
Well, he's complimentary guided, isn't he?
Well, hey, all like it is.
First question is 14 recommendations.
right? Is that what I read?
Actually, 26 action plans that you
Okay,
call.
and what's the timetable on accountability of hearing back on each of these?
The city controller can go through their agenda for monitoring them. The action plans themselves, most of them have a 2-year time horizon. Do you want to go through this?
I just wanted to make a kind of a distinction between the specific steps of the action planning teams. Those are actually, it's really more of a management tool, as Jaime had suggested, that they have an internal process to track how those specific action steps are going to affect positive change for the department. From the controller's perspective, we really looked at 14 specific recommendations that were addressing organizational philosophy and overall strategy, that those were specific recommendations that we've asked the department to respond back to that we are tracking. And the majority of them we have been implemented according to our assessment, and there are about maybe four that are still in progress that we will continue to communicate with the department to make sure.
When you looked at it from an ERIP standpoint, how many folks left in that ERIP, and how valuable in the middle management were they, and what have we done about those particular slots in terms of?
Well, we made an exception going in that there is no more money, that we had to work within the current staffing configuration of the city. Department of Transportation is somewhat blessed because they have a lot of grant dollars that they get in contracts through Metro. What was most interesting to me, I typically find that organizations fail because of the culture, which is why it's very appropriate that the city controller is tracking the organizational and the cultural recommendations. One can come up with great recommendations and ideas as an outside consultant, but if the people are resistant to the change, it's not going to happen. In terms of ERIP, I will tell you that when we go into any city department, so DOT is not alone in this, morale's low. I mean, people remember when they had more people, the organization chart was a mess, no offense, Jaime, that he had inherited. It was like Swiss cheese. There were all sorts of positions that were vacant, and people were straddling their old job, their new job, sometimes 3 jobs. No decision had been made about people who were interim for multiple years. People kept hoping they would go back to the good old days when they had the other staffing complement. So we had to take sort of the tough position to say, we need to design a structure that not only will work today, but it's going to work for the next few years, because we do not see the current fiscal situation changing. We also eliminated an organizational level, which is not an easy task in any city department. They had an organizational hierarchy, which was department. They then had their own bureaus, they had divisions, they had sections. We spent a lot of time saying, what is the difference among all these different levels? And we ended up eliminating the bureau level, because to us, a bureau is what you have in public works. It's equivalent to another department. And some of these bureaus only had a couple dozen people, and were not, in our estimate, worthy of the title bureau.
In other words, you're basically cutting out bureaucracy that you saw at different silos and probably inefficient right hand, left hand, and that kind of stuff.
So we flattened it. We made the lines of distinction between what an executive level does clear, what you do if you're middle management or division management, if you're at the section level, what the reporting hierarchy is, and what even is the time horizon you should be looking at. As the department head, Jaime has to look at the very issue that Councilman Zine raised, which is we are a car-centric society. If we want to be able to shift, that we maintain, yes, our cars, but we also have other modes of transportation that appeal to new generations, or as we create transit-oriented districts, what do we do strategically to help shift our culture so we can handle the future Los Angeles, so it can be a great city?
No, I totally agree, obviously, and when you bring in a new guy who doesn't have a vested interest and isn't part of the bureaucracy, you obviously, he's not in a threatened position, because he needs whatever tools he can do to make it more efficient, not let a black hole happen, and so on and so forth. But procedurally, does this now go to council?
I think it's your decision.
It would
Typically.
it'd be note and filed, sent to council,
Okay.
ultimately.
What I want to do is have it sent to Transportation Committee, because I think my colleagues on that committee need to go over this as well. Some of them have experience on the committee for a while. Some of them, like, I guess Weezer is on the MTA board, and I know Mr. Koretz has a passion for it, and there's a couple of others, but I think an audit of this type that impacts a department directly should go, not just note and file, but should go to that original department that the audit is done on, so that those people have a sense of not only involvement and awareness, they might have other questions, and they might be able to impact it more than a note and a file. And so I'm going to ask that that direction happens on it. But I want to thank you for your leadership. I know it hasn't been easy, especially with entrenched ways of doing things. And I have heard, I've been on the Transportation Committee since I came on this council, so I've been through a whole lot of different changes and situations. But I can tell you that it's a new day. I think you're right on your audit about where we are. Obviously, Mr. Zine is 100% right about other modes of transportation, and we are a car culture. Obviously, many of us believe the Measure R business, which is an exciting, hopeful day, will help us on many levels. And I know our general manager is passionate about the new technology uses that we've done, putting things in the ground and doing that. And the bicycle world, which our mayor, and I praise him for it, for putting that 5-year plan together, working with us in the council who believed in it, and we are ticking off X number of miles a year, and we're making progress on moving into alternative ways of operating. I'm in a big problem right now. We got this crazy ramp jam. I don't know what it really means, but I know my part of the city is already paralyzed because we don't have any mass transit, and people come to work on my side of town from all over the place. And Santa Monica was one of the main generators of it. We have 200,000 cars that go through my district every day to go to Little Santa Monica. Little Santa Monica doesn't play ball with me on many levels where they should. And the cooperation among different cities within this megalopolis is a key component, frankly, because we're all connected. People don't know if they're in Culver City when they get by that ticketed light on Centinela, that it ain't LA City, but it's Culver City. People don't understand that it's not an organic network, which it should be. That's why I'm big on MTA, and I'm big on the cooperation among cities, and I'm a member of the West Side COG. So this, to me, is an exciting new day. And so we'll take it in transportation. We want you all back to go through it. And I know that Jaime welcomes that, too, because it's just a matter of how do we make it better for all of us in this city. I still hear the $240,000 that cost that came out of funds, and I want to...
274.
I just want to make sure it's productively used in the follow-through. You know, one of my frustrations, not with just this department, but other departments, has been the big dark hole that things go down. Unless you have a tickler filer, sometimes you never hear of them again until you think about it again, and you can only do so much. At least in my position, I can't read 300 pages of something like that and analyze it all out. But over some period, with other colleagues involved, we'll be able to know more and be able to be more effective. So that's how I feel about this.
Just a couple more things. The congestion pricing, I know it's going to start on the 110 freeway, not really a part of the city of Los Angeles, but are we looking at congestion pricing or some form of that for city streets?
We looked at that a little bit. I think really we should probably have a broader policy discussion with the council mayor on that issue, because I think there are some legal issues. I think we're probably going to need to get state or federal law to enable the city to do that, but that's something that we need some additional legal advice on. And then ultimately, it really is a policy decision. I just know from my past life that polling is actually very low as far as public support for congestion pricing, but on the flip side, when you look at all of the objective studies in places like Singapore, London, and Stockholm, it does reduce traffic congestion, it does increase transit ridership, it does improve air quality. So, you know, there's going to be a trade-off, and that's really we can bring you options and analysis on that, but it's really a decision that I think the council as a whole needs to mull over as far as the policy goes. And ultimately, it would only be the type of system you put in place where there is congestion. So where you and I live, there probably wouldn't be congestion pricing because it's not needed. In other parts of the city, it's really a policy decision about how you want to deal with that.
Well, I know the 101, I've seen the signs they're ready to unveil. I think the 1st of July, if I'm not mistaken, or something after that.
Right.
Where the carpool lanes on the 110 freeway
Right.
Which is what they have in Orange County. A lot of those toll the congestion pricing. If it's a peak hour, you're going to be paying more than non-peak hour. So it's a whole new environment for us in this region. We've never really seen that. You go to the East Coast and you got toll roads everywhere you go. You got to put money in to get through that particular process. It's a far cry from our old freeways that we've had for such a long period of time, a new transition. The other question I had is the supervisors. Have your supervisors gone through some training to have some coordinated effort on how to be supervisors within the department?
Yep, we're in the process of doing that. We have sent some of the white-collar supervisors, but actually the focus at the beginning was on parking enforcement. When I came to DOT, none of the supervisory staff in park enforcement had ever received any formal training. So we actually partnered with Chief Beck and LAPD. I think you know Commander Williams, who was with us at the time, and all of the supervisors in park enforcement, sergeant, lieutenant, captain, and deputy chief have gone through multiple training sessions at the LAPD Academy, shoulder to shoulder with the LAPD command staff.
I noticed there was a problem. I've been to a number of events where they had people deployed, and they didn't show up. And I was asking the supervisor, where are they? So, well, if they want to show up, they show up. If they don't want to show up, I said, that's not the way you run a ship. That was before your assignment to that particular position, which I thought was reflective on the supervisors not really holding people accountable that are supposed to be there for special events. And it seemed the attitude at one time was, yeah, it's a Sunday, it's cloudy, I'll work. That's a Sunday, I'll go to the beach. When they're deployed for an event, which really creates a gap in what you need to do to deploy operations.
In fact, Councilman, that was such an important area. There's a whole action plan dedicated to what the policy should be, how to enforce it, make sure it's equitable. They had a process where people could get those overtime assignments based on seniority, and they sometimes assigned it to other people to do on their behalf. And then those folks didn't show up, and they didn't even know who was supposed to be the one to be there.
Right.
So the new person who's in charge of that whole area is on top of it. They've been rewriting the policy. They want better technology to hold it accountable and to make it equitable on how overtime's assigned, who gets it, and to make sure they show up.
Sounds like you earned your money this time.
I think
Not that you say you haven't done it last time, but no, that was good. Have you done contracts with the city before?
Yeah, we were the firm that did development reform. We've done the management audits of Los Angeles World Airport, both in 2007 and 1999. We've been done management audits of General Services Department, Asset Management. We've been on the City Controller's Master Agreement list for 15, 18 years.
Okay, very good. Bill?
No, it's great.
All right, so at the recommendation of my colleague, so you're making an appearance at the Transportation Committee, and from what it looks like, Jaime, you got the reins tight.
Trying.
And it's moving forward. All right, thank you all very much. Appreciate your time. Thank you. There's been a request to take number 4.
Just as long as the action is to send it to Transportation Committee.
Normally, we get permission from the council president, then it would just be switched over there.
Okay, well, it's fine with me, so whatever you have to do for him,
Okay, very good.
it's fine with me to do that. So I'll note and file here and then send it over there to Transportation. It's a request of
Okay.
colleague, Mr. Rosendahl. And then if we can go to number 4, then we'll come back to number 3. There's a request for number 4 next.
Item number 4, controller report relative to fiscal year.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry, wait. You know what? I'm sorry, Dr. Williams.
As I were.
I'm sorry, Dr. Williams, on number 2.
We'll pull back our vote on that.
Well, we're still going to vote.
We gotta give the
We
doctor
vote to receive
his-
and file. No, I didn't see that.
Good afternoon, Dr. Tom Williams, LA 32 Neighborhood Council. I came down just for this meeting, just for this
We
issue.
haven't seen you. You've disappeared, so you know what?
I'm gonna-
Out of sight, out of mind.
Your beard got wider and
Uh,
I can't recognize you now.
Where?
You look like Santa. Well, sort of.
Well, we are quite interested in this particular subject because one of the things that we've done is, as some of us go to the Transportation Commission meetings. But we found that they aren't really dealing with transportation. They're mostly with ambulances and taxi cabs and a few other things. The central issue that I have right now on this one is that who sets the policy for this department? We don't know, because the commission apparently doesn't. And if you go through the entire report on this audit, search for the word commission. There's no reference to any policies, visions, missions, or values being established by the Commission for Transportation. as it is done in the Board of Public Works, or in the Board of Water and Power, or in the Board for the Fire Department? What does it do? Isn't there anyone other than the Transportation Committee or the Audit Committee or the mayor that sets the policy for this department? Seems strange, because we have a specific issue. One gentleman from the Department of Transportation was designated as the representative to the Technical Advisory Committee of the SR 710 North Extension. He has not communicated, apparently, the wishes of the City Council of Los Angeles that there should be no project of SR 710 in Zones 1, Zones 2, and nothing in the way of surface routes through Zone 3 of Los Angeles City. That hasn't been done. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Okay, thank you. Let's go to number 4.
Item number 4, Controller Report relative to fiscal year 2010-11 audited financial statement of the Mobile Source Air Pollution Reduction Program.
Hello? We're waiting.
Okay.
Go for it.
My name is Detrick Allen, now with the Department of Transportation. This is an annual audit that is done by AQMD on funds that the city receives annually for the Mobile Source Reduction Program. The amount that the city receives annually, revenue, is about $4.6 million. That money is to be used for reducing mobile source emissions. The fee is generated from your registration fee. There is a fee tacked onto your registration fee, about $4 when you register your vehicle. That goes into a pot of money, and it is distributed among the cities in Southern California. It is also based on population, so therefore we have a higher population of vehicles, and we get the most amount of money in the South Bay area. The City Council had to adopt an ordinance in order to receive this money. The Department of Environmental Affairs was responsible for administering this fund. When the Department of Environmental Affairs went away a couple of years ago, that function and those funds were sent to DOT, and I was sent to DOT to administer those funds as well. So we are here, it's an annual report. The audit proved to say that we were handling our finances correctly. There was one minor finding that was insignificant, and that was due to having records that showed the difference between charging an administrative fee and program fee. And the reason that that happened was this audit was done at the time that EAD was going away, and so some of the records we were not able to find those records, but it was sort of a minor finding, and as far as I know, everything else was fine.
So the question, first off, is how much was the audit?
Excuse me?
How much was the audit? How much?
Around $13,000.
2,000?
13,000.
13,000. Okay, I just said 13,000. Now, I'd never heard of this before, this Mobile Source Air Pollution Reduction Program. What can the money, since we don't have an environmental affairs anymore, what do we use that money for?
What we have done in the process and continue to do that the programs are appropriated in the budget process. And so this past year, funding has been used to support the purchase of alternative fuel vehicles, of which a number of departments purchase those vehicles. And usually this fund is used to pay the incremental difference between a traditional vehicle and an alternative fuel vehicle. It's used to buy bicycles for LAPD. It is used to support the Commuter Services Department in their ride-sharing initiative. It is used to support some of the AGSAC activities. What am I leaving out? It's used to support some of the transportation planning and land use issues. And so every year it goes as a part of the budget process, and this will be a part of DOT's budget now as we go through, and that's the way we appropriate the funds. So it has to be used for mobile source emissions, not stationary sources like, a refinery or that kind of thing. It has to be dealt with for mobile sources.
And does the fund pay for the staff time? Does it cover related, non-related costs?
It does. It does. But what you have to do in terms of administering the fund is to make sure that you also have a portfolio that says we support staff and programs, but you also have to show immediate emission reductions, and cost effectiveness is a key. There is a report that goes to AQMD, a second report that I have to prepare to AQMD that lists the programs, a description, and an analysis about the cost effectiveness for each program. That report is also sent to council for your information and adoption as well. And it's usually done in February every year.
And is it always around $4 million?
It's always around 4.6. It's somewhere between 4.5 and 4.6 million dollars.
Do they expend the funds each year?
Pretty much each year they're expending the funds. If there's some, it's a little bit that's carried over and it will be used in the next program, but usually expend most of the funds.
How many folks do we have administering this program?
I administer the program, and I have some assistance, some admin assistance from a staff person at DOT, and that's it.
So 2 people.
Pretty much.
It's good bang for our dollar.
We have it, and just for your information, there is a 5% administrative cap, so we cannot go over that for the administrative cap. But you can, some of the staff positions are for programs, so we assign that to the program percentage.
So they have tight regulations on it.
Yes, and we have tight regulations, and so we have to make sure that that happens as we allocate money to other departments for the fund.
And from our auditor, Simpson & Simpson, anything that is noteworthy other than they're doing what they're supposed to do?
No, there's no other noteworthy comments. As was indicated, the audit went very smoothly. The dollars are being expended as they are required. Our audit includes not only the financial portion of the audit, but also a compliance with the guidelines. And there were no issues of non-compliance other than the minor comment that we made relative to the documentation of program, a few program expenditures that was not properly supported by hours timesheets that was allocated between program and administrative. But other than that, there were no other findings.
Thank you. Mr.
Yeah, just curious, you might have seen in the news lately, EPA is not supporting these clean air things anymore right now. I don't know if it's an election political game or something. Does that impact us at all on the local level?
Usually what we find is that in Southern California, because there is a priority on air quality and air quality benefits, and we have an active community and active stakeholders, that most of their regulations are even stricter. And so this will not impact this because this is really at a state level. And so I don't envision that this pot of money will be impacted. We do also make a good case every year, especially those jurisdictions who get quite a bit of money, to put forth a stellar report so that when it comes to the state, as you're looking at state budget cuts, that money is not targeted to be used for something else outside of what it's for. And so we work in partnership with AQMD to make sure that that happens so that we can have this pot of money. It's a small pot of money, but it's sort of like a bridge. It really helps out. It has its own little niche.
Okay, you mentioned 5% cap on administrative costs, but I understand we're $81,931 over it. Is that true?
That happened in the last audit, and the reason that happened in the last audit was there was a transition of the fund from EAD to DOT. And in that transition, at the time, the administrator for the fund was gone to EAD, and so there was a gap in really paperwork as EAD was closing out.
So we didn't get fined or penalties or anything?
What they will do is, there's nothing in this report that does that, but what they will do is evaluate it for the next cycle, because it's always like a year later, the next cycle, and what they will do is they will deduct that $81,000 from our revenue for that year. So it would be, $4.6 million minus $81,000. But that was a unique case that we've never had before. We've had the fund for, 15 or 20 years and had stellar audits ever since. But that's what happened there.
Thank you very much.
All right, so note for receive and file.
Note and file would be.
Note and file, that'll be the directive. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Number 3, please.
Item number 3, Controller reports relative to the performance and compliance audit of the Workforce Investment Act grant-funded programs.
Okay, who wants to start? Eeny, meeny, miny, or mo?
I'll go.
You may mo.
Good afternoon. My name is Cedia Reese, Internal Auditor for the Audit Division, Controller's Office.
Wait, you're the general auditor?
Internal Auditor, the auditor in charge for this specific audit.
Oh, what do you do?
He's my boss.
Supervise.
You're always here, and then there's the man who's always watching everybody, and then I see Wendy way back in the corner looking over. Okay.
We conducted a performance and compliance audit of the Workforce Investment Act grant-funded programs at the Community Development Department. It was issued February 9th. The objectives of the audit were to determine whether WIA-funded and the ARA-funded special training programs were being managed and funds were spent in an effective and efficient manner and resulted in the intended outcomes, including meeting the established goals and objectives. And we also looked at CDD's fiscal and performance monitoring processes, client data collection, and performance outcome reporting. We reviewed activities from July 2009 through March 2011 and focused specifically on the adult and dislocated worker programs funded by WIA formula funding and the WIA ARA funding. Some background: the City of Los Angeles Workforce Investment Act oversees annual funding decisions and provides policy guidance to CDD, who subcontracts with 18 agencies throughout the city to provide services to those in need of employment assistance. In FY 0910, the WIB allocated $18.5 million in formula funds and $19 million WIA ARA funds to adult and dislocated worker activities. The primary intent of the WIA funding is to provide job placement services, followed by job training when deemed necessary. Overall, we found that although the WIA-funded grant programs consistently meet goals as established by the Department of Labor, there are several opportunities for improvement. The key findings: although the average cost to place a WIA client in a job is consistent for the years reviewed, we looked at 3 years, the employment retention rate is decreasing. We acknowledge that some individuals may have been laid off because of the recession. However, there may be other causes for the declining rate, but it's unknown because the department does not collect this data or conduct this type of analysis. We also noted that work-source centers may not demonstrate the most effective and efficient use of WIA funds. For example, an analysis of the 0910 fiscal and program data compared centers' costs to the number of job placements achieved, and we found varied results. For example, centers with expenditures between 1.2 and 1.5 million had extremely different outcomes in this program year, with job placements ranging from 148 to 409. We also found a concentration of centers in certain areas of the city, such as downtown, which has 4 centers within a 3-mile radius. And this may not be the most cost-effective for allocating WIA resources. We also noted that the contracts for all 18 centers have not been competitively bid for over 18 years, which has prevented other agencies to join the system and perhaps increase service efficiency and effectiveness. We looked at the ARA special training programs in a little more detail and found that they resulted in fewer job placements than the other regular WIA formula training. For example, on average, we found that 82% of the clients trained through the regular WIA programs were placed, whereas only 53% of the ARA specially trained clients were placed in jobs. However, we do acknowledge that the department decided to focus the ARA special funding on individuals that were in hard-to-serve populations, such as juvenile offenders or foster youth. We also noted that the department does not report performance measures and outcomes in a manner that is readily understood by the public and decision makers. They're given in percentages, so you don't know if 80% means 8 out of 10 or 80 out of 100. For the fiscal side, we found that CDD's process to review the agency's indirect cost rate needs improvement. We identified one agency's indirect cost rate where the methodology used by the agency was questioned by its external auditor but was not followed up by CDD. The agency's methodology would have allowed it to recover indirect costs as a direct charge as well as through the indirect cost rate. The same agency also applied the previous year rate to the current year's expenditures, and as a result, this agency was reimbursed more than was allowed.
To the tune of how much?
A couple thousand.
Okay.
Program monitoring practices also primarily focus on compliance with WIA guidelines as opposed to reviewing the cost effectiveness of centers. And finally, the department TDD lacks a comprehensive integrated data system to collect program data and report results. Overall, the report contains 17 recommendations, and CDD management was in agreement with all of them. As of now, 8 of them are in progress, and 9 are in progress, and 8 are not yet implemented. However, the department has provided target implementation dates through 2012 through January 2013.
Not a glowing report.
We do have a response, of course. Manny Chavez is Assistant General Manager with the Community Development Department. First of all, we want to thank the Controller for the report. We take feedback that is provided by our various funders as well as the Controller very seriously. Over the years, going back to the inception of WI, we have managed approximately $1 billion in federal funds with no disallowances related to that. Additionally, through these very tough economic times, our work source centers are serving on average 180,000 individuals a year, and we are successfully meeting the federal performance standards that are established by the Department of Labor, and we've actually been recognized with incentive awards for our success in actually meeting those goals. Going back to your item number 1, where you had an appointee to the Quality and Productivity Commission, the department actually actively pursues those awards as well and finds them very valuable in terms of promoting efficiencies. Some specific responses, and yes, we do generally concur with the report, but again, we did want to highlight some of our successes. In terms of procurement, the Department of Labor regulations actually allowed us to grandfather in previous providers under the prior legislation and to continue funding those organizations as work source centers as long as we certified them. So every year we actually evaluate those work source centers through a formal process that is approved by the Workforce Investment Board and transmitted over to you folks on an annual basis. The Department of Labor accepts that in lieu of procurement. Although we are currently funding 18 work source centers, at one time we actually funded 26. And as a result of issues related to performance and ability to continue to manage programs, that number was reduced to the current 18. As it relates to the automated system and data collection, that has been a challenge for us. However, we rely on the state system that is known as job training automation for the reporting of all of our participant activity. That system is actually being abandoned, and a new model is being implemented effective September. And we have been promised that that will be a much more efficient system for our use, both for entering data and for reporting out on performance. In terms of the variation in costs and what have you, in terms of the actual costs of serving individuals, we're working closely with Cal State Northridge to actually study the variations in those costs as we prepare to actually release an RFP this fall to actually re-procure the system. So acknowledging that we have 18 centers that are all doing good work, nevertheless, we will be rebidding the system this fall. And the Workforce Investment Board has actually convened a task force for public input, as well as the input of various board members to solidify the guiding principles for that particular bid process. Lastly, in terms of the retention rates that were referenced, we consistently meet the retention goals that are met by established by the Department of Labor, but at one point we were exceeding those goals by 6%. We're now down to exceeding those goals by 1 percentage point. Our high point of success was 2008 at the beginning of the recession, so yes, it is partially attributable to that, but nevertheless, we're committed to looking into that as a corrective action. So again, we thank the Controller for the report. We take the recommendations seriously and have submitted the complete plan that's been accepted by the Controller's office.
Okay. The the cost of this audit?
This was an internal audit, so it was internal staff costs. It's about 1,000 hours.
Yeah.
I think it was a direct staff hours of about 1,000 hours, primarily by this individual.
Okay. Because most of them I see are under contract.
About half.
Half and half?
We have 14 professional staff, the auditor, in total.
So what's the operating budget of CDD?
The workforce,
Annual operating budget?
on an annual basis, the workforce investment dollars approximate $45 million.
$45 million.
In this case, they monitored or audited specifically the work source centers that are funded at 18.5, roughly, $1 million.
And what's the breakdown of the operating budget for job training versus education?
We kind of approach it from a different perspective. Number one, under the current legislation, job training is the last resort. So essentially, we're supposed to, as an individual walks through our doors, our first effort is to connect them to a job. If the need is identified through assessment, then we move into job training. The goals that have been established actually through new legislation at the state level are at 20%. So 20% of our dollars have to go to job training services. Specifically, we are actually pushing that to 30%, with 10% of that being with leveraged dollars in addition to the WI expenditures.
And what is CDD doing to evaluate the success of this Essential City program after this audit by the controller?
Again, we have pretty much laid out, I think, a well-articulated plan to the controller. We've assigned individuals to actually respond to every one of the recommendations. So I personally will be responsible for tracking that during the year. I think the most significant undertaking that we will be taking on is the RFP to release in the fall. That'll capture much of what is referenced in the recommendations, hopefully address them all. Unfortunately, we won't fund new providers until July 1 of 2013, but it will be a learning year for us nevertheless.
When's the last time they did an RFP for providers?
For WorkSource, it goes back into the 90s. They were funded under previous legislation under the Job Training Partnership Act. The new legislation allowed us to grandfather those organizations into the new delivery system, again, provided that we certify them annually.
So they've been there a long time. Maybe it's time for some fresh ideas and
it's probably not a bad idea.
new energies. So how do we evaluate them on their success?
We have a very comprehensive evaluation system right now. It's commonly known as the SOFA. So we evaluate them in 4 major categories. One is the satisfaction of the individuals that are served. Secondly is the outcomes. Did individuals get placed, or were they retained on the job? What wages were they paid? The third is flow, the number of individuals that actually avail themselves of services through the centers. And the last category is administrative capability. How well did the organization essentially manage their administrative practices? And finally, or lastly, we actually require our WorkSource centers to apply to the California Council for Excellence for an independent assessment of their management practices.
And how have the federal budget cuts affected service delivery of the vital programs giving these challenging financial times?
With the exception of ARA, where we had that significant bump or increase in dollars, we've had the good fortune of hovering at that $45 million range. We're hoping to at least stay there. This current program year, or rather the year that begins July 1, we are level funded. What has impacted our service providers is the demand over the past few years. Going back, we were averaging about 120,000 individuals walking through our doors. We're probably around 190,000 today for this current fiscal year. So it's an issue of demand. Also, with the increased requirement of allocating more dollars for training services, that will impact the WorkSource Center's ability to staff in terms of personnel.
And then what partnerships have you established so that we ensure that each person is trained and according to their skill set in order to increase the efficiency and effectiveness of the workforce development?
We have very successful relationships both with Los Angeles Unified School District Adult Education as well as the Community College District. Those course offerings are made available to our participants essentially at no cost, which is why we pursue them. We do use, on a limited basis, private vocational schools. That is not a practice that we necessarily support. But again, we have had good success with the public entities, and we have actually co-located on their campuses in some cases.
Now, I know that West Valley Occupational Center is having some major cutbacks. And I'm sure that some of the other LAUSD adult training, how can we share some of those $45 million with them to keep those programs going? And what I find amazing is that these are adults that want to go to school to get a trade. They're not skipping class, they're not truant, yet they see the LAUSD for whatever reason wants to cut. I have in my district the West Valley Occupational Center where they have the auto shop, which I understand we're closing, the computer labs where over 200 people were signed up to take classes, a waiting list, activity that get people jobs and employment, and LASD's cutting those back. How do we take some of the money and help fund those programs, or do we at the schools?
We actually do not fund the LAUSD for its programming. We do work in partnership with them to ensure that they do get reimbursed on participants referred out to them for services.
But the problem is they're cutting the programs out, eliminating like auto shop, eliminating computer labs.
It's a concern for us. One of the primary issues that we have in terms of the folks that come through our door, and which wasn't pointed out in the auditor's report, is 90% of the folks who walk through our door have a high school degree or less on average in the last 5 years. We've been serving 71% of the folks coming to our doors without a high school degree. So we're talking about a number of folks who are low skilled and have low educational levels. And we do work with the Community College District and with the Adult Basic Education, LAUSD, as well as the LAUSD program itself, K-12, to serve the vast majority of participants to acquire those skills that will make them eligible for training. A number of our participants lack the basic skills to even participate in training programs. So moving someone into a training program without addressing the basic skills needs does them a disservice and does the system a disservice. So we're working in partnership with those educational institutions to bolster and buttress their educational level.
But then how do we bridge that? It's like we've got the two gaps. We've got the educational institutions over here, trade schools, et cetera, LAUSD administered. We've got the people over here, you folks, that have the clientele, and then we want that bridge so they can learn some type of occupation, profession, be a productive member of society. How do we bridge that? Because right now it seems like there's a big gap with LAUSD cutting off the adult education. Now maybe it's going to come back in some smaller form. But when I went out to basically the last day out at West Valley Occupational Center to thank the teachers, a lot of them were saying, this is our last day, we're gone. Meanwhile, all those folks that you're trying to help where we have money, who we want to give, they go to a placement center. Well, placement center is great. I need a computer technician. I need a diesel mechanic. I mean, if you look at what LAUSD, adult education, everything from airline mechanics to diesel mechanics to auto repair, auto shop, I mean, it runs the gamut where you can learn that trade and earn a living. How do we fill that gap that currently exists and it's getting worse?
What we've done with the Community College District, and it's probably something we should continue to pursue with the LAUSD Adult Basic Education, is to search for grants that are available to combine the educational piece with the training and the placement side. So we've worked with the Community College District on joint solicitations and have developed partnerships where we actually can funnel folks from the Community College District into our placement centers, folks from our placement centers into the Community College District receive services. We need to expand that approach with the LAUSD, Adult Basic Education. The difficulty that we do find is that under WIA there are funds available for job training and there are funds available for educational services, and they simply, we are not very effective at bridging those two together.
Well, we need to, because obviously we've got money, they have a need, and there's that big gap, and that bridge has to somehow be
We-
established.
We have money, but not sufficient to serve the folks that are walking through our door. So as Manny has mentioned, we have 180,000 folks coming through our door. These are unique individuals walking through our door, on average 3 to 4 times. Of the 180,000 folks, the vast majority of folks that we're looking to work with are folks who are basic skills deficient, and we're trying to address those issues. It's not that we have $45 million available for training.
Yeah, 18.5 million.
Right, no, it's not available that we have, it's not that we have $18.5 million available specifically for training. We have set aside 30% of the allocation this coming year, moving forward this coming year, for training services. And
Where are we going to train them if there's no educational institution to train them? What are we going to do? We're not going to train them.
there are a number of different modalities for training, in addition to the educational institutions. We try to focus on those training modalities that will yield us a placement. On-the-job training is probably the most effective training opportunity for us, where we work with an employer to address their needs, identify a participant who will fit the needs, and then use the time while they're on the job to acquire the skill sets that will allow them to retain their job at the employer.
It sounds good, but I don't see it really happening. What you're telling me sounds good, but it doesn't seem like it's happening. That's the concern I have.
I think we had great success in establishing the bridge under our current model, but with the loss of the revenue for LAUSD, that's the real challenge.
Exactly.
The 18.5 million actually covers the infrastructure costs related to having 18 sites and the personnel to actually staff those sites. So even the 30% that we're setting aside of 18.5 million is minimal. It's simply not enough revenue to serve the number of people that walk through the doors. So yes, we're going to offer training, but it's not going to be to very many people.
Well, then we're not accomplishing a whole lot, to be honest with you. And
Because we
that's
don't
the
have
thing
the
that troubles me,
resources.
is we need to do more to help these folks who are being displaced. Or we're going to have more homeless on the streets and more families on the streets. It's incumbent that we do it. If we're spending 18.5 million or 45 million, that money's supposed to get those people some type of profession. And there are jobs out there if they have the right training. But if they lack the basic skills, then it's a pretty desperate situation. LA World Airport, Water and Power, the port, I understand you have no connection with any of those entities for jobs.
That's been a little bit of a challenge for us over the years. We've had various discussions with them, but have never had anything formally established. Got very close to working with LAWA, but unfortunately the MOUs that we had drafted were not executed. We would love to have access to the various contractors that they actually fund and the various jobs that they have available to make those available to our work source centers and the individuals that they serve. Again, that's something that simply is not.
Well, let me say this, what we're going to do, and I know my colleague, Mr. Rosendahl, is as frustrated as me about this, that we're going to keep this hearing, this committee. What we want is LAWA, Water and Power, and the port, and we want a game plan of how we're going to invest this 18.5 or this 45 million, other than staff costs and benefits, how we're going to help the people who need these positions. So I appreciate the audit that was done by the controller, and it obviously reflects there's a huge problem, and we need to step up to the plate to figure out if LAWA and Water and Power and Port, which are city families that don't want to step up because you've been cordial and nice, and they're saying, well, thank you, but no thank you, then we'll bring this into committee and have them come here in committee and explain why they can't find positions, the apprenticeship programs and all for these folks. But I think you're trying to do something, but you're knocking your head against the wall. If you knock your head against the wall, you're saying, you know what? We can only go so far. Well, maybe we have the horsepower to take it another step. And that's what we want to do, is keep this in committee. Mr. Rosendahl?
Yeah, I totally agree. Let me just go through a series of questions, okay? Mr. Zine asked a question about 18 workforces and competitive bidding. So we've been in these 18 work centers, and there's been no competitive bidding for over 10 years.
No, since the 90s, 12 years.
Well, I got 10 in my thing. How many years are we talking?
Well, since the inception of WI, which goes back to essentially 2000 is when the program was rolled out.
Okay.
So.
All right. So it is 12 years, not 10. Okay. Why haven't we done it?
We have not done it specifically because we've been pleased with the success of the center operators, and the legislation allows us to continue to do that without the competitive.
I don't like that. We obviously want to see that raised. Why 18 centers, not 7 or 10 or 15? Why 18?
The 18 centers, if you look at a map, they are essentially located in the most impoverished of the areas of the city where we have high unemployment and poverty. So there is sort of a method to the madness, if
Okay,
you
well,
will.
let me go through my question, because I don't know if it has to be that many. I understand the funding for the centers is based on 7 planning commission districts of the city, as well as various factors such as whether or not the agency owns or leases its building. Is this the most appropriate and effective way to determine how funding is allocated?
The areas of the city goes back a few years. In terms of moving forward and actually working on the new competitive process, we will be looking at the new American Community Survey data to identify the areas of need so that we can plot out where would be the most appropriate location for us.
So I look for that, as Mr. Stein said, when you do the report back. Third question is, the controller found that a concentration of centers exists in certain areas of town, such as downtown, which has 4 centers within 3-mile radius of each other. What criteria are used to determine the locations of the 18 centers? Could more evenly distributing some of these centers give us more bang for our buck in terms of increasing job placement in more communities throughout the city? According to the controller audit, although the cost of the centers to place individuals in jobs is generally consistent between the years reviewed, the employment retention is decreasing. Could the employment retention rate be decreasing as a result of the overall state of the economy and job market? Or are there reasons to believe that the CDD program and individual centers are to blame? I'm asking you to answer now as we report back, okay? Obviously, the MOU concept, you got 3 major departments that have serious, I can tell you for LAX personally, billions of dollars are being spent, billions. And there needs to be the ability to shift into those 3 proprietary departments. As much as we're in a recession, LAX has got one of the biggest public works projects in its history, okay? As much as we're in a recession, the port has significant challenges, but also today in council, we talked about all working together to see that we remain competitive. DWP, rates are cheaper than other power companies, and the ability to have people working there is very important. And as for job skill centers, I went to the Venice Skills Center the other day. It's a direct hit in taking people from the streets or from other jobs and training them for other. It's an absolutely great program. And they were mumbling too about how will this affect them. We've got to work with the LAUSD in a cooperative way on a lot of things, and I would like to see a better energy play of how they feed into each other. Just like Mr. Zion said as well, it's kind of embarrassing for us to go to these things and hear that these things are going to drop. When we look at the eyes, at least I did just last week, of the graduates, young and old. I mean, there were young ones who were just getting excited, and there were people in my age bracket and maybe 10 years younger than me that are out of work and are truly learning new skills to survive. So we've got to collaborate with those centers too. So I look forward to all that and report back.
So why don't we have the clerk send a letter to LAWA, DWP, the port, and LA Unified Adult Education to come to this committee in 45 days, see how we can assist CDD in their mission and goal of helping these folks with some type of an opportunity for employment. And whether it's 18.5 or 45 or 10 million, whatever it is, we need to put it to better use. And then the situation of going over 10 years without an RFP, some of those folks may be the best, maybe not be, but we need to clean that up because there's so many people who are looking for work. And oftentimes I think the money goes to run the administration, and when it runs the administration, it doesn't really help the people who really need to have that opportunity to have employment. So we have one public speaker. Thank you for the controller's office. And Wendy was in the corner. You didn't see Wendy over there?
No, I stood up and looked for her.
He actually did. Dr. Williams on public comment, and then we'll be concluded after Dr. Williams. Thank you for CDD. Dr. Williams, you have the floor. You have the floor, sir. We're all listening.
Dr. Tom Williams, LA 32 Neighborhood Council and former certified external auditor for ISO 9000 and 14000. That's for quality assurance and environmental. There's another audit being done in the city of Los Angeles, in part. The state auditor is investigating Caltrans and their housing and properties within the city of Los Angeles. They don't know how many they have. They don't know how many are occupied. They don't know the conditions of those. And South Pasadena City Council had a little discussion presentation by the state auditor. And it showed that Caltrans makes a very nice facade, but doesn't do anything on the inside. We have found in numerous surveys, walk-bys, that, some people get painted, some people get roofed, some people get gutters, some people get new windows and door sashes. But the general element is that most people are afraid to say anything about Caltrans because they face reprisals. And there have been numerous situations where various reports to the LAPD has led to, these people have a lot of complaints against them. Well, no substance. One person has been evicted or attempted to be evicted 3 times and successfully fought the eviction in court. Not everybody can do that. And what we're concerned about is that LA City apparently doesn't even want to participate or even know what's going on, because the council person had one representative there, but it had never been told to the community that the hearing by the state auditor at South Pasadena City Council was to be held. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. All right, that concludes, and it is 22:04, and we are concluded. Thank you.